Most people don't realize how much of their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making millions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might just sell credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/hidden. Protect yourself now at aura.com/hidden.
Car Con Carne is sponsored by Sopal Solar. As interest rates are climbing, rocketing for mortgages and credit cards and car loans, how about having cost certainty on your electric bill? Know what you're going to pay every month and have that amount be less than you're paying right now. All it takes is switching to solar. Sopal Solar is how you get there. My friend Brent Sopal, he used to be a Chicago Blackhawk. He will help you switch to solar. It costs nothing for the consultation, costs nothing out of pocket, and the savings you can get this year, while the year is still in progress, from both state and federal, add up to like 48%. It's significant. Switch to solar, get a 25-year warranty. Go green. Do it now. Tell Brent I said hi. SopalSolar.com.
It's Car Con Carne. Let's eat in the car. It's Car Con Carne. And now here's the star of our show, James Van Alstyne.
It seems like the 1990s were a really long time ago. They were a really long time ago. Do you miss that period? Do you miss grunge and punk and indie, all the music from that decade? What if you could time travel back to the 90s? Think about all the cool shows you could see. Maybe see some shows again, see some shows for the first time. That's the premise behind the brand new novel, 90 Days in the 90s, a rock and roll time travel story, the ultimate novel about the 90s and Chicago's music scene. Not just any music scene in the 90s, the one right here in Chicago, which was, by all accounts, including mine, amazing. Join record store owner Darby on her trip back to 90s Chicago as she jumps on the mysterious gray line to time travel back to her carefree 20s, soaking everything up. Pop culture, rock and roll nostalgia. If you want to learn more, go to 90daysinthe90s.com and get a signed copy of the book while you're there. You can also pick it up on Amazon or wherever. 90 Days in the 90s. It is Car Con Carne. I'm James Van Alstyne, and the music photography of Paul Natkin has, for decades, been pretty much the gold standard for how musicians should be captured on film. It's been a long time coming, but Paul's most iconic and some of his most interesting work is finally collected in a gorgeous coffee table book. It's called Natkin, The Moment of Truth. From Muddy Waters to Johnny Cash, David Bowie to the Beastie Boys, Paul's lens caught major artists across all genres in unforgettable images. Now, I've known Paul forever. I don't think I've ever interviewed him, so this is a first. Paul Natkin, it is lovely to see you, and this is long overdue.
It's quite an introduction.
I think you're worthy of it. I mean, you're the guy. I mean, for people who take images of musicians, you are the person, you're their touchstone. You're their guiding light.
That's a scary thought.
But it's true. And looking at this book,
their sights higher.
Looking at this book, you're such a Chicago Midwestern self-deprecating guy, but that's not the truth. You're excellent at what you do, and you can see proof of that in Natkin, The Moment of Truth. I said it, but this is long overdue, isn't it? I mean, it seems like this is a book that we've all been waiting for from you, or some sort of collection from you.
Well, I hate to be negative right off the start, but I never wanted to do a book. Because everybody I know that did a book ended up not making money off of it. And I'm not saying that I'm motivated by money, but it's it's kind of one of the motivations. And
Sure.
when there's a guy that's was kind of my idol before he passed away, his name was Jim Marshall. You might not know the name, but you know the pictures. He's the guy that took the famous picture of Johnny Cash giving him the finger. He was the last guy to ever photograph the Beatles together on stage at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. And he was the man. And I remember walking into a Best Buy, not Best Buy, Barnes & Noble, when Barnes & Noble was still around.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw all three of his books on the remainder table for like $4 a piece.
With the red sticker on it.
With the red sticker, like, sale, buy one, get one free. And that's when I knew that, if you looked at his work, I know my work is good, but I can't compete with him. And if he couldn't make money doing it, how am I going to make money doing it? So I never wanted to do a book.
Well, I'm glad you did. And I understand your reasons. I loved being able to thumb through this. The people you shot through the years, so many of whom are no longer with us. So that's the interesting thing. All these legends.
A lot of dead guys in the book.
Just going down the list: David Bowie, Eddie Van Halen, Michael Jackson, John Lee Hooker, John Prine. What a list of artists you put a camera in front of. What's interesting in the modern day, and we've talked about this off air, so to speak, and I want to bring it up now. The world you came up in, the photography world you came up in, is very different from the way concert photography works now. And you were the first person to explain this to me, the first 3 song rule at concerts. Back in the day, you would shoot an artist and you'd get to like the end of the set, and that's when all the good shit happened.
That's when they start, they build their set to a climax. And by the time the climax happens these days, all the photographers are back home watching the news on TV.
Right.
They're not even in the building anymore.
Because photographers are allowed first 3 songs usually, right?
Or less.
Or less.
Or less.
How can you be a photojournalist when the subject you're shooting controls the shot?
You can't.
Right.
You can't. And that's why I don't do it anymore.
You don't do it at all?
I'll do it if somebody will let me shoot what I want, the way I want to shoot it, which happens about 1 out of 100 bands that comes through town. And they're usually bands that are friends of mine that I've known for years.
All the most iconic images in rock and roll were not taken in the first 9 or 10 minutes.
No, absolutely not. I could honestly say that my guess is, if I went back and looked through the book, not a single picture in the book was taken during the first 3 songs.
I can't imagine. You want the artist to build that momentum and that sweat and feed off the audience. You capture that energy in film. Right.
And the artists don't want that.
Right. They want to tell the story.
If you ask them about it, they would tell you they have no idea why.
Is it a management
They just know
thing?
that everybody else kicks everybody out after 3 songs. So we got to kick people out after 3 songs too.
God, it's so interesting to me. Like, what are the artists afraid of?
There are a number of things. Number one, it started when MTV came about and all the videos showed perfect hair and perfect makeup. And after 3 songs, you start looking a little bedraggled. That's one thing. Another thing is, I've been told by managers that I make too much money off of them. So they want to limit. One manager told me that I was making too much money off of his bands. And we were sitting just like you and I are sitting right now, talking on the phone. And I was in front of my computer and I said, well, you in front of your computer? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to send you my latest sales report from the agency that represents me. And when you get it, open it up. And a minute later, he said, okay, I got it. Open it up. I said, look at the last column on the right and read down that column. And that's my share of every sale. And all I heard was silence at the other end of the line. And then I heard, oh my fucking God.
It's terrible.
And because more than half the pictures that the agency that represents me sells, my share of the sales under $2. And a lot of those pictures are under 25 cents.
That's bananas. Well, let's talk about.
So that's That's a big part of it. The other part of it is this is like a 3-part answer. The third reason that the 3-song rule happened was Bruce Springsteen was playing a show at Madison Square Garden, and there were about 100 photographers there. And they were all using flashes because most of the photographers in New York are paparazzis. Mm-hmm. They don't know how to shoot. So they have to put a flash on their camera. And he walked off stage at intermission and went up to his road manager and said, I can't even concentrate on singing because flashes are going off in my face like every 5 seconds. And his road manager said, well, let me work on it for tomorrow. And he made a decision that changed the whole world of photography. He could have done one of 2 things. He could have said, okay, you guys can shoot whatever you want, but you can't use a flash.
Yeah, that's the easy answer, right? No flash, that's it.
Or he could have said, you guys can only shoot the first 10 minutes and then you have to leave. And he made what I think was the wrong decision. But, you know, that was 1983.
And you've got Springsteen images in your book, one of which was turned into a Newsweek magazine cover.
Right.
And there's no way you shot that picture of the boss in the first.
No, because I was always, and still to this day, I'm allowed to shoot the whole show
of Springsteen.
Yeah, because I don't shoot him anymore. But the last time I shot him was at Wrigley Field, and I shot from start to finish. And you know, the irony is, I'm in the photo pit, and I look over, and standing next to me is Eddie Vedder, and I turned to him and said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he said, well, I'm going up on stage in a couple songs to sing with Bruce. And so I got all the other photographers were gone because it was after the first 3 songs.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
And about 5 minutes later, he's up there singing with Bruce. He went up like 4 different times during the show. Tom Morello came out on stage 4 different times during the show. All of that after the first 3 songs. So Wouldn't that be kind of an important moment in the show?
That's crazy. Let's talk about some of these images. I could do an entire episode on several of these images, but I want to start with Motorhead in Chicago, a picture taken in 1983. This is one of my favorite pictures in the book. You took it at a McDonald's.
Right.
This is Motorhead at their young, snotty rock and roll best. I couldn't.
They weren't so young. They were already pretty old, but they were younger than they are now.
I was trying to place based on the windows in that McDonald's, I was trying to place the neighborhood and I couldn't.
Irving Park and Central, I want to say. Somewhere in
like Portage Park?
Portage Park, like right up there somewhere. You could probably drive down Irving Park and find a McDonald's and then look across the street and see, you can see a dry cleaners, I think, through the window and tell exactly where it was. But it was just random. You know, I mean, they got in my car and I said, well, you know, what do you want to do? And Lemmy said, well, you know, we need to get some food. So what's better than to take them to McDonald's and take their picture with, you know, Ronald McDonald?
That's fantastic.
Which is not in the book, but I've got pictures of them like posed with Ronald McDonald and with the Hamburglar.
That's amazing. And I guess that leads to a question I was going to ask later. If you're not shooting concerts anymore because of the 3-song rule and the ridiculousness that exists in the pits these days, are you doing mostly portraits? Like, are bands...
I'm doing mostly sitting at home watching CNN.
Well, I'm glad I was able to break that up a little bit for you then.
Yeah. Well, you know, all CNN is just all Florida hurricane stuff right now. I live for hearing all the bad things that Donald Trump is doing. And I don't shoot much anymore at all. I shot Buddy Guy's last album, his new album cover. That was a portrait. That was a couple months ago. I shoot maybe once a month, where in the old days I used to shoot 30 days out of the month.
Yeah. I remember, especially in the 90s, as I was starting out in radio, I swear I saw you everywhere.
I was everywhere. I went to every freaking show that happened in Chicago. Sometimes I went to 3 shows in one night.
Yeah. I think we all did back in like the mid 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. But I've photographed over 4,500 artists. My list is about a little over 4,500 names of either bands or solo artists or individual celebrities, whatever you want to call them.
That's amazing. Some of the other pictures I was showing as I was preparing for tonight. My son is into country and metal, like no points in between. He goes those two. It's interesting. But he's fascinated by outlaw country. And I showed him the picture of Cash, Johnny Cash, that's in the book, and it stopped him dead in his tracks. And you say in the book that this was basically like bucket list, life-changing moment for you, was shooting Johnny Cash.
Well, anybody that's on that level, I walk in the room and I'm looking around like, is this really me here? Because it's Johnny Cash.
Yeah,
and
on the level, you mean someone who basically was an architect of modern music.
Yeah, exactly. And he walked in, and my fear is always that they're going to end up being jerks.
Sure.
And I'm never going to be able to listen to them again because I'm always going to think about them being jerks. But for the most part, they all turn out to be, Johnny Cash turned out to be the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. And I could have shot him for 2 hours. He would have skipped his show and just kept on shooting, but he had to go and do a show. Couldn't have been nicer.
I don't know your craft, so this may sound like a rookie question, but what's the secret to shooting someone like that? Because I'm looking at that picture, and to me, the lighting helps tell the story. You see all the wrinkles and the age and the history in his face.
A lot of people don't like that. Like if I were shooting Stevie Nicks, I wouldn't be showing the wrinkles because she would hate that. But Johnny Cash loves that. Keith Richards loves that. He earned those wrinkles.
He did. He's going to outlive us all.
Yeah.
The picture of Keith in your book, the portrait with the skull ring, until I read what you wrote, I hadn't realized this either. He's flipping you off in the picture you took of him. But like he has such this mesmerizing look on his face, and you're distracted by the ring. You don't even realize that he's flipping you off.
Well, I didn't realize it. I got home and developed the film, and I made the proofs, and I printed some of the other shots on the roll and never saw the finger. I didn't see it when he did it because I'm looking at his face and I'm focusing on his eyes.
Yeah.
And it was a year later. Somebody came over to my house, and people tend to come over to my house and say, hey, can I look through your file cabinets? Which, they're all right over there. They're all, anybody wants to look at them, as long as they keep them in the right order. I don't care. And I can't remember who this was, but this guy was looking through the Keith Richards photos, and all of a sudden he turns to me, he says, why didn't you ever print the one? I circle the ones that I print on the proof sheets. He said, why didn't you ever print the one where he's giving you the finger? And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the first I saw that.
That's amazing.
And then that became like my biggest selling print.
Oh, for sure. And your relationship with the Stones, that's a big career.
It started that day.
You. Was that really it?
That was the first time I met him.
And so that was like the Talk Is Cheap, like solo Keith Richards era. Like
first solo album.
Because that was like 87 or 88, and that was before Steel Wheels.
88. It was 88. Steel Wheels was 89.
Yeah.
So sometimes my next door neighbor was a guy named Don McLeese.
Okay.
The greatest music writer ever in the history of Chicago. And he called me up. He was a Sun-Times music critic. Mm-hmm. He called me up one day and he said, hey, listen, I'm going to New York tomorrow to interview Keith Richards. And the paper won't send a photographer. They're too cheap to send a photographer. So if you want to pay your own way, just come with me. Sleep on the floor in my hotel room, and we'll get up in the morning, we'll do this thing and come home.
Yeah, who says no to that?
How do you say no to that?
Yeah, you don't.
It was like $400 for a round trip ticket in those days. And we went to Keith's manager's office in Midtown Manhattan. I did the photo shoot. And while I was packing up the stuff, Keith was being interviewed by Don, and Don asked him, like, hey, you got the solo album out. Are you going to go out on tour? Because, that's a big thing for somebody from the Stones to go out on tour without the rest of the Stones. And Keith said, yeah, we're going to do a tour around Thanksgiving. So I just filed it away in my little brain. And I went home and I developed the film, and I made a bunch of prints for the Sun-Times because that's who I was working for.
Mm-hmm.
And when I made the prints, I made an extra one of each print. Because when you're in the darkroom, you make a print, it looks good. You just put another piece of paper in, make another one, and you're done. Wash them and dry them. So I made a set of prints for the Sun-Times, and I made another set that I just put in an envelope, 8.5 by 11 envelope, put some stamps on it, and I wrote a note in there. I remember the exact wording of the note. I wrote it to Keith's manager. And I said, hey, I heard you guys are going out on the road. If you need a tour photographer, give me a call. Sign my name. And it was on my stationery. So she didn't even know me. I mean, she had met me 2 days earlier. No idea what I did for a living, what kind of work I did. But my phone number and address were at the bottom of the stationery. And I just threw it in the mailbox on the corner.
Now, the kids these days would call that shooting your shot.
Yeah.
You were shooting your shot with the Stones.
Yeah. So I threw it in the mailbox and just forgot about it. And then 2 days before Thanksgiving, I get a call from Jane Rose, Keith's manager. And she says, so what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I'm getting ready for Thanksgiving. I'm going to my parents' house. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, get up tomorrow morning, get on a plane, fly to Atlanta, get in a cab, come to the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton, and call me when you get here. So I had never been on the road with anybody. Right. I had no idea what a tour photographer was supposed to do. I just, it's Keith Richards. How do you just figure it out.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
So I called her up. She says, go out to the tour bus in front of the hotel, put your stuff in the bottom of the bus, and just wait in the lobby. We'll be down in about 20 minutes. And 20 minutes later, the elevator opens up, and Keith and the expensive winos come walking out, and we get on the bus. Nobody knew who I was, except for Keith had met me for 5 minutes, like a couple months earlier. And I'm just sitting there. I don't even know where to sit on the bus.
Right, because there's a hierarchy. There are rules.
There's a plan. Everybody has their own seat. And we drive to the gig, and here I am shooting a Keith Richards show. And then we get on the bus and we go to the next city. And all of a sudden I go from Atlanta, we go up to Boston, we go across the country to LA, and we end up back in New Jersey for his birthday party in December. And I just figured I could die happy now. I've done, what can be better than that? That's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. So I get home and there's 3 weeks of mail in my entranceway at my house. And on the top of the pile, there's a Rolling Stone magazine, the first issue of 1989. This was December 20th, 1988. And so I pick it up and I lay down on the couch and start reading it. And I get to the random notes section. There's a little article that says the Stones are, at that point, they hated each other.
Yeah.
They're all mad at each other and they were never going to tour again. And the article said they've decided to get back together and they're going to do a tour later on in the year. So I wrote the same note to the same person. Hey, heard you guys are going on the road. If you need a tour photographer, let me know. Same thing happened. Get a call one day about 3 weeks into the tour. She says, what are you doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
And I said, well, I guess I'm coming to meet you. Where are you? And she said, get up in the morning, fly to Boston, come to the Four Seasons, call me when you get here. And 3 hours after I got to the Four Seasons, I'm at Foxborough Stadium shooting the Rolling Stones in front of 70,000 people.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And then we leave there and we get in vans and go out to the airport and we get on a private jet. And for sure, I don't know where to sit on that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just standing there in the middle of the aisle like an idiot. And Bobby Keys was in the band. And Bobby was in Keith's band. Mm-hmm. So I knew him from being on the road with Keith. And he looks at me and he beckons me over and he says, looks like you're having a problem there. Come on and sit with me. So I ended up sitting with him for the whole. I was supposed to do a month with the Stones on that tour, on the Steel Wheels tour. So I sat with Bobby and Bill Wyman.
Oh my God!
And we just Bill Wyman just kept on looking out the window to make sure the wing didn't fall off. And Bobby would tell stories about like being on the road in the 50s with, like rock and roll guys from the 50s. The Stones used to open for bands he was in.
That's amazing. It's like rock and roll fantasy camp for you.
Yeah. And then like 3 weeks into my month, I'm figuring, okay, now this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Nothing gets better than this. And I get a call in my room, the Ritz-Carlton in New York, from Keith's manager. And she says, hey, can you come up to my room? And I go up to her room and knock on the door. She opens the door and she's standing there, Mick's manager is standing there, and the publicist is standing there. And it's like being called to the principal's office,
For sure.
Like, what did I do wrong?
This could either be really good or really shitty.
All I could think of was, I'm going home tomorrow.
Right.
Maybe I'm going home today, And they all stood there and looking at me, and Keith's manager says, we got a problem. And I said, what's the problem? And she said, well, you're scheduled to leave us in a week, but everybody in the band likes you. We love your work, and we want you to stay for the rest of the tour, which is another 2.5 months. And how do you say no to that? You
don't, especially, you were much younger. Of course you don't.
Well, I was younger, but I was still pretty old in those days. That was 30 years ago, but I'm 70 now. So, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it today.
God, no.
But, so I did 3.5 months on the road with them.
That's the coolest.
And, we flew all over back and forth across the country because they don't follow a route. They have 3 stages that are all set up in various parts of the country, and they fly from one to the other. There's a West Coast stage, an East Coast stage, and a Midwest stage. And so we'll play 4 days in New York, and then 2 days later, we're playing 4 days in LA.
Right.
So we, got a lot of mileage in flying around the country with them. And that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, I can't imagine topping that. That's...
Well, I've done 2 other tours with them, like not for as long, but and I did a month on the Voodoo Lounge tour, and that was fun, but it couldn't top the Steel Wheels tour. Yeah,
because that was also, like you said, that was the reunion. It was the reconciliation between Mick and Keith.
Yeah.
There was
it was
so
something
much...
that was never supposed to happen.
Right.
And it happened.
So much behind that. Jumping around to some of the other shots, I guess I wanted to ask, when did you start shooting? Because some of these pictures go back to the mid-'70s. Like, when did you first get in front of a band?
The first show I ever shot I was a sports photographer, and I was shooting a tennis match up in Evanston on the Northwestern campus. And I was parked across the street, across Sheridan Road, next to a building called Conn Auditorium.
Sure.
Which is right where Sheridan Road turns in the middle of Northwestern campus. And I was parked up against the wall of Conn Auditorium. And the tennis match was over like at 7:00. No lights, so it had to be over before it got dark. And I went back to my car and put my stuff in the trunk, and I started the engine. And there was a commercial on the radio that there was a concert that night that was taking place 5 feet away from where I was sitting. I couldn't make this up if I tried.
Seriously.
And it was this girl that I'd just barely heard of by the name of Bonnie Raitt. And she was just starting out. Her first album was out, and she was playing at Conn Auditorium. And so I shut off the engine, and I figured, okay, I'm here. I've managed to BS my way into any sporting event that I wanted to go to in the city of Chicago. Let's see if I could BS my way into a concert. Because I was always a music fan.
Yeah, clearly.
So I got out all my equipment, and I made up this lie that I was working for this new magazine called Rolling Stone magazine. I figured nobody had ever heard of Rolling Stone, and it just started a couple of years before. And, they weren't going to have somebody there, so I could lie about that. And I got to the back door, and I opened the door, and there's a guard sitting there. And I got ready to tell my big lie. And before I could say anything, he looks at me and he sees my cameras hanging. And he says, oh, you're with the press. Go in and do whatever you want. Just don't get on stage. And like,
that easy.
No problem. I'm there. It was never that easy again, ever.
For sure.
But just that started my career.
It was meant to be at that point. It was absolutely meant to be.
I figured if I could just walk into concerts, what could be better than that? You know?
For real. I mean, that's the American dream, I'm pretty sure.
Everybody else has to pay, and I get the best seats.
Where did you shoot Bob Marley?
I shot him twice. I shot him once at the Auditorium Theater, and the picture that's in the book I shot at the Uptown Theater.
Okay, that's I was aware that he did a show there.
Uptown was the second show that I shot of him.
For those of us,
it was great.
I'm sure. For those of us who never had the chance to go to the Uptown, there are so many legends around it. Was it as awesome as people recall, or was that kind of revisionist history?
It was pretty awesome. There were some amazing shows that I saw there. I saw, I think, 5 separate Grateful Dead shows there. I saw at least 4 Springsteen shows there. Wow. Rod Stewart, Peter Gabriel.
Oh my God.
Genesis with Peter Gabriel in the band. Jay Giles band, they were the last band to ever play there.
Mm-hmm.
Shut it down the next day. And it was a great place. The only problem was there's no place to park.
Right, which is the problem in the present day for that area as well.
Exactly.
You mentioned the Dead. Where was the picture of Jerry Garcia taken?
Probably there. I don't remember at the moment. I don't have it in front of me, but probably there.
I was looking through the book, wondering if I'd been to any of the shows that you shot. I mean, some of these were maybe a little bit before my time. One of the best shows, I swear to God, one of the best shows I've ever been to is captured in this book, and that's PJ Harvey, 1995. That was the Vic. That had to be the Vic.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That was. She is.
I shot her a lot. I used to work for. It's ironic considering the conversation we had before we got on the air. I used to work for Shure Microphones, and that's a Shure microphone in front of you. And she was an endorser. So I used to photograph her every time she came to town. I shot her like 5 times, but that's the best picture I've ever gotten of her.
So good. Some of my I love Bowie. To no end, I love David Bowie. And you have 2 of my favorite pictures in the book are of Bowie. One from 1977, so that was low era Bowie. Right. And then from the Serious Moonlight tour in 1983, you've got Bowie in the cracked actor, sunglasses, the Yorick skull in his hand. That picture to me is iconic, and that is so symbolic of that tour.
Well, I keep on going back to I have to go back to the beginning of this conversation. So my friend Steve was his publicist, and he told all the photographers that night, you can only shoot 3 songs, and we're going to escort you out of the building. You can't even stay to watch the show.
Oh my God.
And then he came up to me as he was escorting us all into the photo pit. He came up to me and he said, when I escort everybody out, just get in the back of the line. And when everybody else goes up the stairs, just like peel off and go into the crowd and wait about 5 minutes and then just go back in there. And he let me, like, that didn't happen during the first 3 songs.
Of course not.
Well, he posed for me because he figured I had to know somebody. There had to be a reason that I was there, that I was standing right in front of him by myself in this big empty photo pit.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, 3 songs into a Bowie show, he changes looks and scenes, and I mean that show it changed throughout. It'd be like shooting Talking Heads on the Stop Making Sense tour and leaving before the full band got on stage.
Right, when it was only the 4 of them, which is not bad, but
or just exactly. And you do have Talking Heads in there from 1980, I think.
Yeah, from the Aragon.
I just love how your history and this book bounces across times and genres too. I mean, even folk music. You have some artists in there that, I think the job of a storyteller is to make the subject interesting to people who think they're not interested in the subject.
Right.
Case in point, you have a picture of Peter, Paul, and Mary from 1978, an artist I generally think I don't give a shit about. I looked at that picture and thought, oh, that's awesome.
It's one of my favorite pictures, and nobody's ever bought it. I've never sold it anywhere for any reason whatsoever, but it had to be in the book because it was a technical challenge. And my mother raised me on listening to folk music.
Sure.
And when I got a chance to shoot Peter, Paul, and Mary, first of all, you got to get all three of them in the same picture. Right. And most times when there's like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, when they play together, Crosby's over here, Nash is over here, Stills is in the middle. Mm-hmm. And there's all this dead space in between them. So it's impossible to get a good picture of the three of them together.
Right.
Unless they're off stage. So I'm thinking the same thing's going to happen with Peter, Paul, and Mary. And I get there, and they've got this fancy microphone stand with three microphones on the same stand. So they got to be right next to each other. So the goal was to figure out where to be to get the best angle to not get a microphone in front of somebody's face.
Right.
And it was luck. I got in the right place.
And there's a kinetic energy to that shot, which I love so much. An energy that you wouldn't necessarily see or feel coming from that music.
You should go out and buy some Peter, Paul, and Mary albums. You'll love them.
I guess I should.
Amazing. I listen to them all the time.
Do you really?
Yeah.
All right, I'll go back and listen.
I have like 3,000 songs in my iTunes, and when I'm working around the house, I just like, okay, here, I'm going to listen to Peter, Paul, and Mary now. I'm going to listen to Bob Dylan now. I'm going to listen to Guns N' Roses now.
Guns N' Roses, also in the book. Another interesting thing that comes from reading this book. Again, the book is available now. It's an amazing coffee table book. It's a must-have. Right place, right time. There are a couple examples of pictures in this book where you, Paul Natkin, were in front of the right band at the right time, whether it's Quiet Riot or, more interestingly to me, the Go-Go's at Chicago Fest. That picture of the Go-Go's, my God, they look as young as they were then.
They were. I didn't even know who they were. I was the official photographer of Chicago Fest. So I used to I get there in the morning, like at noon, 11 o'clock, and there were 5 stages along Navy Pier, and I would just walk from stage to stage. And one of them was a jazz stage, one was a blues stage, one was a country stage. And there were big bands that played on these stages. And Muddy Waters would play in the blues stage. And I would just walk from stage to stage, photograph each band. And I remember walking the rock stages all the way at the end of Navy Pier. And I got there about 11:45, and the first band went on at noon. And I walk up, and there's these two cute girls sunning themselves on lawn chairs out in front of the dressing room. And I walked up to them and said, "Hey, are you guys in the band?" And they said, "Yeah, we're in the first band." And I said, well, "How many people are in the band?" They said, "There's 3 more in the trailer." And I said, can we go inside? Can I take some pictures of you guys? And they said, "Sure, no problem." And we went inside. I took like 6 pictures. Never thought I'd ever hear of them again. And then they got really big, and they used to come over to my house when they came to town. And I was in LA once, and I went to see Richard Thompson play in Beverly Hills, and I was with some friends that drove. And if you don't drive in LA, you're screwed. There's no cabs. There's no way to get anywhere. And I was staying in Hollywood, and my friends wanted to leave, and I wanted to stay and shoot pictures of Richard Thompson.
Yeah. And
Jane Whelan walked up to me from the Go-Go's, and she said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to leave because these guys are leaving and they're my ride." And she said, "Well, I'll drive you home after. I'll drive you back to the hotel afterwards." So I stayed. And then she got so drunk that I wouldn't get in the car with her. And luckily I found a cab and I got back to the hotel. But that's, she didn't think, she was okay with that. But, and we've been friends ever since. I mean, I saw them a couple years ago, and they're still great.
They're still great. Let's talk about what is, I think, one of your most iconic shots. It's Ozzy with Randy Rhoads taking at the Rosemont Horizon.
Right.
That's it. I mean, that's peak Ozzy Osbourne.
It was another total accident. Not an accident, but I wasn't even supposed to be there. It was Super Bowl Sunday, and I'm a sports fan.
Right.
So I was hired by a keyboard magazine to shoot pictures of Ozzy's keyboard player, who in those days, you were considered a wimp if you were in a metal band and you had a keyboard player. So the stage was this big castle with these two turrets on either side. And they put the keyboard player up in one of the turrets where you couldn't see him.
Of course.
But you could hear him because he was,
right.
he was playing. He was in the band. So publicist said, well, I don't know how you're going to shoot him. There's, you can't see him from in front of the stage. And I said, well, what if I go to sound check? Because the only thing that I cared about was getting home in time to watch the Super Bowl. So he said, yeah, come to sound check and, just walk up there's circular stairs in the turret. Walk up there. The guy's name was Don Airy. Walk up there and introduce yourself and take some pictures of him. So I did. This is like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon. The game started earlier in those days. It started like at 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking I got enough time. If I pack up my stuff really quick, I can get in my car and get home to watch the Super Bowl. So I'm getting ready to leave, and the publicist was there. And he said, well, where are you going?
I've been in that situation.
And how do you say to him, like, I don't care about your stinking band. I want to go home and watch the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, I got other plans. I got to go. And he says, I know you want to go and watch the Super Bowl. And I said, yeah, that's kind of it. And he says, well, I'll tell you what. We're all the Americans on tour are watching the Super Bowl backstage, and Ozzy's not going on until the game's over. So just come backstage and have dinner with us and watch the Super Bowl, and then stay and shoot the show because you'll really like it. So,
yes.
There was never any question that I was going to shoot the whole show. So I watched the Super Bowl with them. A bunch of English guys that didn't know anything about football.
Right.
We had to explain to them what was going on every step of the way. And then I shot the show. And at one point, Ozzy picks Randy up and holds him over his head. And I took a picture. And like a month later, Randy dies in a plane crash. And it's become the most famous picture I've ever taken. And it's been on everything.
Everything.
I'm looking up right now. There's a snowboard hanging from the wall in my office with that picture on it.
It's an iconic shot. I mean, that is that moment of the 80s for metal, for Ozzy, for all of that.
Yeah, but I should have been watching the Super Bowl.
That's serendipity. You mentioned in the book, one of the most exciting days of photography in your career was shooting Amnesty International in the 1980s. And that was just like superstar a go-go at that event.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. The most interesting part of it was that whole first 3 songs thing
mm-hmm.
was in effect in those days. So here's this organization that's supposedly about freeing people from jail. After every band played 3 songs, they would take all the photographers and they'd lock us in a room.
Irony duly noted on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was before I decided I wasn't going to fall for that. And the only band that let us shoot the whole show was U2.
I mean, if you had to pick one to shoot.
Yeah, the Police I would have picked them probably over U2, but I got good pictures of all of them, everybody. Peter Gabriel was on that show. Lou Reed was on that show.
Is that the picture from Lou Reed in your book? Is that's mullet era Lou Reed? So I'm thinking that's probably the same time. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. That wasn't from there. That was actually, I spent about 5 years working for this woman that runs a talk show in Chicago, ran a talk show in Chicago. You might have heard of her.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I became known as a guy that was really good at shooting pictures on TV shows. And David Letterman did a week's worth of shows at the Chicago Theater.
Mm-hmm. And
the first day he was on, this was right across the street from where Oprah's studio was.
Right, right.
So he had her on as a guest. So NBC hired me because they figured, okay, you know Oprah, she's going to be comfortable with you being there. So and they said, why don't you shoot? We'll pay you to shoot the whole week. So I shot the whole week for them, but I kept the pictures for myself too. And one of them, Lou Reed, was one of the musical guests one of the days.
Awesome. So this was what year? 88, you said?
I can't remember. I don't have the book in front of me. I should have it in front of me, but I don't.
Well, what people can do, if they're curious, they can get the book and they can find out for themselves.
All the dates are on the bottom of the pages.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, a lot of shots came from Poplar Creek. I saw lots of Hoffman Estates credits. Was that the last great outdoor venue in Chicago?
That was the only great outdoor venue in Chicago. It's really an interesting story. I have, I worked for a Chicago Fest for the entire run of Chicago Fest. And there's a woman there that was the publicist for Chicago Fest. And she had a friend who was moving here from Detroit to build a venue out in the suburbs. It was before Alpine Valley was around, but that was the only outdoor venue. Otherwise, people would have to play at the Rosemont Horizon or the Chicago Stadium. So her friend Lou came to town and he picked out a piece of property and he plotted out where this venue was going to go. And he's a very meticulous guy. He actually he camped out there for a while and he figured out where the sun was going to set. So it wouldn't be in the eyes of the performers or of the audience. That's the attention to detail.
Yeah, I was going to say that's detail-oriented construction, right?
And he built the perfect venue. And meanwhile, Chicago Fest ended, and my friend Jill ended up marrying this guy. And she was hired to be the publicist for this new venue called Poplar Creek. So I was friends with both of them. And Lou, his name is Lou Raisin. And Lou called me up one day and he says, well, why don't you come and be our official photographer? And we'll give you a total access pass. And we'll give you a parking pass where you could pull in backstage.
Amazing.
And park with the fire trucks. You don't have to have a fire truck there in case a fire starts.
Yeah.
So I had the best access that anybody could ever hope to have.
That would explain all the Poplar Creek shots in the book. Okay.
Yeah, and I would go out there, 4 times a week.
Why not?
And I would shoot. I wouldn't just go out there to shoot, Phil Collins. I'd go out there to shoot Pavarotti.
Yeah.
Because I could.
Right.
Not because I went and shot Lawrence Welk.
Oh, you've got
all I had to do was show my pass and I could walk right in.
You do have a lot of old school, like different era superstars in there. You've got Dean, Sammy, and Frank Sinatra in there.
Oh yeah. I love that stuff. And that stuff is valuable.
For sure. I mean, you're an archivist. You're telling music history in pictures. I love it.
Well, I'm an archivist that stopped archiving about 10 years ago because nobody lets me shoot anymore.
What a crime. Well, in the looking backward, the stuff you have to date is so spectacular. I mean, I use the word iconic probably too many times in this conversation, but these are iconic pictures. The one last picture I want to ask you about before I cut you loose, Mellencamp in the garbage can.
Oh boy, I'm not sure if I should tell this story.
Well, I was going to say Mellencamp's not known for having a sense of humor.
No, he does not. I didn't even know who he was. I never heard of him. And
so this was very early in his career.
When his first album came out.
Okay.
And he was staying at a hotel on Michigan Avenue. And I got a call from the Illinois Entertainer. They called me up and said, hey, can you go down and take pictures of this guy, Johnny Cougar? And when I worked for the Illinois Entertainer, they paid $20 a photograph. And it costs, at that point, like $15 to park.
Right, of course.
The roll of film was about $4. The printing was another $5, you know, because it's no digital stuff. So I had to make prints and send them to them.
Mm-hmm.
I had to mail them to them. So postage. So guaranteed to lose money. Guaranteed before I even left the house. So I go down there and I call him in his room. It was at the Intercontinental Hotel, just right on Michigan Avenue next to the Tribune Towers. And it's very grumpy. And he says, come on up to the room. And I go up to his room. And he says, I don't really want to do this. Let's make this really quick. And he gets up.
If I had a nickel for every time I heard that.
Well, if I had a nickel every time I heard that, I'd be rich. Gets up and we go out to the elevator. We go down to the lobby was on the second floor. Then we had to ride down an escalator down to the street level. And we're riding down the escalator and he turns to me and he says, let's make this really quick. And we walk out on the street and he dives into a garbage can. And he says, shoot the picture. And I shot 2 pictures. And he gets up, he dusts himself off, and he says, that's it, we're done. And goes back in the hotel. That was it. And
so
to this day, he thinks it's one of the greatest pictures of him ever taken. And he's got it hanging in his living room.
That's crazy.
But, you know, he's not a nice person. Let's put it that way. I started, shortly after that, I started working for Farm Aid.
Right.
And I became the official Farm Aid photographer from 1990 until about 4 years ago. Donated my time, donated all my expenses. All they did is they gave me a hotel room wherever Farm Aid was, and I shot for them, gave them all the pictures. And loved everybody that worked for Farm Aid. They're all great people. They're wonderful people. And then about 5 years ago, I got into a slight argument with Mr. Mellencamp backstage. And he said something to me and I called him an asshole. And about a week after Farm Aid that year, the woman that runs Farm Aid called and said, John has requested that you no longer come to Farm Aid. And that was it for me.
Wow.
So, you know, it's great while it lasted. I got great pictures of Willie Nelson and Neil Young.
Who are both in the book. By the way, Neil Young, the picture of him, it's hard for him not to look like a badass.
Oh, he's a total badass.
Total badass. The
but
shot
that was
you have in the book
earlier Farm Aid.
Yeah.
That picture.
That is a great vision of Neil Young in your book.
Yeah, and he's the real deal.
He is the real deal. You're the real deal, Paul Natkin.
Well, you know, I'm trying.
You're succeeding. I love this book. I love the work you do. I mean, to me, this is a form of storytelling. And I think, you know, it's true. A picture can tell a story if it's taken the right way. And if you're mindful of what you're doing, these pictures all tell stories. They tell stories of different times, eras, movements, feelings, and expressions in music. Again, across all genres, from Muddy Waters to John Prine to the Beastie Boys. I love this book. It comes in handsome slipcase editions, suitable for any bookshelf. There are a variety of slipcase editions that you can order on trope.com. Maybe the Freddie Mercury, David Bowie combo is appealing. It's appealing to me. Lots of choices based on your moods. Really lovely to connect with you and have an excuse to talk about what you do and talk about rock and roll history.
No problem.